Leicester City have sacked manager Steve Cooper after just 12 games in charge of the Foxes, and Leicester fans, let me know what you think in the comments below, because I've seen a wide range of opinions. On one side, I've seen people say that they think it's a little bit of a harsh sacking, he needed to be given more time and he was doing a decent job. And on the other hand, I've seen people say that, you know what, the results didn't match the performances have not been good enough, and it was time and well overdue actually that Steve Cooper was sacked. Me personally, I'm probably just in the latter camp. I do think that the performances that Leicester have had so far this season, while they've had some decent results, I think in terms of the performances, they've had good spells, maybe even good moments. But in terms of the entirety of one game, I don't think they've had that. I don't think they've been good or solid for the entire 90 minutes. And I think that it was probably an overperformance, not only just based on the eye test, but also when I looked at the underlying numbers. Because when you look at the league table, it doesn't look too bad at the moment, especially when you consider Leicester, this is not the team that won the Premier League or the FA Cup. This is a newly promoted championship side, and that's how we need to be looking at Leicester and not having the expectations of the past. So just stay up in the Premier League. So at this point, to be 16th in the league, not in the relegation zone, and on 10 points, it's pretty good going, you would think, on paper at the first glance. But when you look at the underlying numbers, 23 goals against Leicester conceded so far this season, from an XG against of 22.8. That's okay. So defensively, they're doing as well as the numbers suggest they should be doing. But in terms of going forward, I think that's where the real issue starts to present itself for Leicester City and under Steve Cooper, and why he ended up getting sacked. Because from 15 goals that they have scored so far this season, that is from an XG of 12.8. So that means that they're actually overperforming the amount of goals that they're scoring this season. And, obviously that can come down to a numerous amount of things. I think come down to a little bit of luck, a little bit of the striker doing a better job than they're doing. And especially when you got someone like Jamie Vardy, who's got Leicester's top goal scorer this season in the Premier League with 4 goals, you probably would expect him to, do better than the chances that he's getting. But when you actually look at it compared to XG for versus XG against, it actually shows that according to the stats, Leicester City should be second bottom in the Premier League at the moment. Second bottom. And so while it may look like on paper 16 in the Premier League not doing a bad job, but if the numbers say you should be second bottom, that means that Leicester are overperforming. And after 12 games, it might be a little bit of luck on Steve Cooper's part. But then you've got to take into account that Leicester had 2 penalties so far this season. So if you look at the non-penalty XG of Leicester City, it means that from open play, they're only expected to have scored 10.7 goals this season, which also is the second bottom and second worst in the whole Premier League. So going forward, Leicester really haven't been good enough. But I do have some sympathy for Steve Cooper, because it was obvious coming into the season that Leicester needed to have some reinforcements in the attacking areas. You got Jamie Vardy, who, I don't know, what is he, 36 now? He's far too old, and you cannot rely on him week in, week out, and you need, someone to help him and supplement the attack. Leicester didn't go out and they didn't sign a centre forward, not one of real quality anyway. They they bought Bobby De Cordova from Fulham, they got Jordan Ayew from Crystal Palace, and they got a couple of loan players as well, but it wasn't really the attacking reinforcement that Leicester needed. And so I do have some sympathy in that regard, but I do think that this Leicester side on paper is capable of playing much better than they've shown so far. And so ultimately, while, the situation that Steve Cooper came into, it was a very difficult one because, replacing Enzo Maresca, they lost their best player in Kieran Dewsbury-Hall. They had a potential points penalty looming with PSR deadline, which they thankfully overcame. But it wasn't a great situation for Steve Cooper coming into the Leicester City side. And I think, he probably can leave with his head high and just, go, what else was I supposed to do? I did as best as I could. And I think that it was the right decision for Leicester City to sack him. But with that being said, you do have to question the timing of it, because just coming off the back of the last international break until March, you do think to yourself, if the manager was one game away from being sacked, one game away, and you're playing Chelsea, an informed Chelsea who are chasing for the Champions League at the moment, surely you think to yourself, you sack him during the international break, you do it then, so you give yourself the whole 2 weeks to then be able to think to yourself of who do you want to replace him in charge. You get up a list of managers you think will do a decent job and keep you in the Premier League and maybe take you forward, and then you give yourself time to make that decision. Why do it after the international break, after the Chelsea game, in which you're probably expected to lose anyway? I think that is a little bit surprising and something that I do have to question about the higher up at Leicester City. But not only that, I think it was the timing of his sacking on the weekend as well. Because you have the 12:30 game, which Leicester lose to Chelsea, and that's understandable. You probably didn't expect to get anything from that game. But then to sack him on the Sunday, why not wait till Monday? Because you're probably not going to get anything done on the Sunday anyway. But why also announce it at 3:50 in the afternoon? And I think the timing is really, really important, because that is in between the Liverpool Southampton game, and the Man United Ipswich game. The Liverpool game is a big game on the Super Sunday because of the fact that Liverpool had an opportunity to go 8 points clear of Manchester City. And the Man United game is obviously a big one because of the fact that Ruben Amorim is the first game in charge at Man United, and so there's going to be a lot of headlines about him as well. The timing of the announcement to make it in between those games, it was literally almost as if they were waiting for the Liverpool game to end to announce Steve Cooper being sacked. And so the mainstream media and the YouTube community as well haven't really had time to digest the news that Steve Cooper's been sacked. And have they done it intentionally to try and hide the headlines? Because maybe it looks a little bit of a failure on their part of the fact they hired a manager in Steve Cooper and they sacked him immediately after 12 games. They're the second manager to be sacked in the Premier League, and I haven't really, if I'm being honest, seen anything from the big guns in the mainstream media or from social media and on YouTube as well. So that I think is a little bit surprising. So maybe they've done that intentionally. Why? Who knows? Maybe they're just embarrassed about the fact they brought in the manager and they sacked him after 12 games, and it looks a little bit of a failure when you give him a multi-year contract as well. There's that. There's probably the embarrassment. Why not sack him during the international break? Did they feel like, because of the fact that it was Chelsea, because it was Chelsea who took the manager of Enzo Maresca, because it was Chelsea who took the best player arguably from last season of Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, did they feel like if we sack Steve Cooper and then we're looking for another manager, we're looking for our second manager in 12 games of competitive football in the league after we lost Enzo Maresca, does it look embarrassing on us? Can we not? We don't really want that headline, especially being 12:30 game, the first game of the weekend after the national break, and the first game which everyone's going to be highlighting on TV. Did they think to themselves, this looks way too embarrassing? So wait 2 weeks, let him loose to Chelsea, and then sack him. I do think that the performance itself had a little bit of something to play in that as well, because when you think about it, 4 shots at home in total in that entire game wasn't good enough, and only 1 shot on target, and then 1 shot was a penalty, which he ended up scoring. That in itself wasn't great. Jamie Vardy, when he got substituted, looking incredibly frustrated, and I don't blame him because Leicester were really, really poor, showed a lack of desire, showed a lack of hunger, and that performance was a performance against a manager sacked, and it did. So what happens now next for Leicester City? Oh dear. Because where do you go now after Steve Cooper? I do think that they're in arguably a little bit of a better position than they were in the summer, because in the summer, like I said, lost Maresca, lost arguably the best player, you had the PSR and potentially a points penalty looming over the head. But now that the fact that everyone knows that Leicester aren't going to be getting a points deduction, and the fact that you do probably have some money to spend in January as well, it is a lot more of a promising perspective for a new incoming manager to come in and look at. And so what manager would want to take this project? Well, I've got the 5 names who are most likely according to the betting odds. I'm going to start in reverse order actually. We've got Mark Robins firstly, the former Coventry City manager. Me personally, I don't think so. I think you need someone with maybe top flight experience. And while I do think Mark Robins is a fantastic manager, the ending at Coventry, while it probably was a little bit harsh, I do think the way he ended with them near in and around the relegation zone in the Championship, in the lower mid-table, I don't think that Mark Robins is probably the right fit right now. Second, the 4th favourite is Carlos Corberan at West Bromwich Albion, 6th place in the Championship at the moment, a really good manager, really plays good attractive football. But again though, he hasn't got any top flight experience, so I'll probably just pass on him just now. 3rd favourite, Ruud van Nistelrooy, someone who was at PSV, had a whole season there, but he ended up leaving at the end of the season because he said he didn't think this side was capable of going to achieve the things he wanted to achieve. But the next following season after he left, PSV ended up winning the league, the Eredivisie, and so that's kind of a little bit of a blot on him. Yes, he had the 4 games at Manchester United as interim manager where he ended up winning 4 games. 2 of those were against Leicester City, ironically. But in that, I wouldn't read too much into it just because of the fact that, Man United just got a manager sacked. Of course, the players are going to play well for whoever the new incoming manager is going to be. So I probably would look past Ruud van Nistelrooy. So we've got the first and then the second favourite. One of these 2 managers would be my pick personally. You've got Graham Potter and you've got David Moyes. I think with David Moyes, the football wouldn't be great. It'd probably be football similar to Steve Cooper, but probably be a bit more effective in the fact that you'd end up scoring more goals. And I think if you were looking for a manager to guarantee you Premier League survival, there probably isn't one, but he's probably the most likely to guarantee you Premier League survival. And in terms of the long-term vision though, I do think that it would end up a little bit similar to like it did at West Ham, where everyone would say, yeah, he did a great job keeping us in the league, getting us away from the relegation zone. However, the football isn't great, it's a little bit boring, and we want something a bit more exciting. And I think that's knowing that would probably happen in the long term, that probably puts you off a little bit of David Moyes. So for me, if he wanted the job, I would give it to Graham Potter, a manager who hasn't been in the job since he got sacked at Chelsea, which is arguably 18 months now. It's been a while, and he has been doing the media round, so he's looking to get back into it. And for me, I think while it doesn't give you the same guarantee of Premier League survival, it gives you a pretty decent survival rate of being in the Premier League next year. A manager who would play good, attractive football, and especially in the long term, you could see yourself getting back up to, the top half of the Premier League, where Leicester City and where the Leicester City fans really want to be. So my personal choice, I would probably go for Graham Potter over anyone else. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think it was harsh that Steve Cooper got sacked? Was it the right decision to be made? Let me know.